Chapter 1: The Man Nobody Noticed. My name is Daniel Carter. I am 52 years old. For 18 years, I worked as a janitor at Maplewood High School. Most people never noticed me. Students rushed past me every morning. Teachers smiled politely, but they were always busy. Parents rarely looked in my direction. To almost everyone, I was simply the man holding a broom. And honestly, I was fine with that, because I didn't work there to be famous. I worked there to build a life for my family. Every morning, my alarm rang at 4:30. Outside, the streets were still dark. The town was asleep. I quietly got dressed so I wouldn't wake my wife. Then I made 2 cups of coffee. One for me, one for Sarah. She always smiled when I placed the warm cup beside our bed. "You're leaving already?" she asked every morning. I always gave the same answer. "The school won't clean itself." She laughed every single time. That little laugh made every early morning worth it. We never had much money. Our little house was more than 40 years old. The wooden floor creaked whenever someone walked across it. The kitchen cabinets had been repaired so many times that each door looked different. Our old blue pickup truck had more than 200,000 miles on it. Sometimes it refused to start. Sometimes the heater stopped working in the middle of winter. But somehow, it always got me to work. Sarah and I often joked that the truck was just as stubborn as I was. We never dreamed about becoming rich. We never wanted a mansion. We never cared about expensive vacations. Our biggest dream was simple: a quiet life, good health, enough food on the table, and enough love to fill our home. For many years, that was enough. When I arrived at school every morning, the building was silent. I liked those moments: the empty hallways, the smell of fresh floor cleaner, the sunlight slowly entering through the tall windows. Before students filled the building with noise, it belonged only to me. I unlocked every classroom, checked every emergency exit, turned on the lights, picked up papers left behind from the day before. Sometimes I found forgotten homework. Sometimes a child's jacket. Sometimes a small handwritten note that said, "Good luck on your test." Little things like that reminded me why I loved schools. They were full of hope. Around 7 o'clock, teachers began arriving. Most greeted me kindly. "Morning, Daniel." "Morning, Mr. Carter." A few stopped to chat. Mrs. Wilson, the music teacher, always asked about Sarah. Coach Harris always complained that he was getting too old to keep up with teenagers. Those small conversations became part of my routine. Then the students arrived. Within minutes, the quiet building transformed into complete chaos. Lockers slammed shut. Shoes echoed through the hallways. Friends laughed together. Someone was always running late. Someone was always searching for homework they forgot to finish. I watched them all, not because it was my job, because after 18 years, you begin to recognize faces. You notice when a quiet student suddenly becomes confident. You notice when the happiest child suddenly looks sad. Sometimes they didn't even realize someone had noticed, but I did. One rainy afternoon, many years ago, I found a boy sitting alone near the gym. His backpack was soaked. His shoes were covered in mud. He looked frightened. "Everything okay?" I asked. He quickly wiped his eyes. "I'm fine." I knew he wasn't. Children often say they're fine when they're hurting the most. I sat beside him without saying another word. After several minutes, he finally spoke. "My dad lost his job. My mom cries every night. I'm scared we might lose our house." I didn't know the perfect words, so I simply listened. When he finished talking, I reached into my lunch bag. I handed him the sandwich I had saved for myself. "You'll need this more than I do." He looked at me with surprise. "I can't take your lunch." I smiled. "Tomorrow I'll bring another one." He thanked me quietly. Then he walked away. I never expected to see him again. In fact, by the following school year, I had completely forgotten his name. At the time, I had no idea that small act of kindness would return to me many years later. Chapter 2. The day everything fell apart. Life has a strange way of changing. Sometimes it happens slowly, so slowly that you don't even notice. Then one morning, everything changes at once. For me, that morning began like every other. I arrived at school before sunrise. The parking lot was almost empty. The cold air stung my face as I stepped out of my old truck. I grabbed my toolbox, my coffee, and the ring of keys that had been in my pocket for almost 18 years. Those keys felt like part of me. Every door in the building trusted me. Every hallway knew my footsteps. I unlocked the front entrance. The familiar smell of fresh paint and floor wax greeted me. I smiled. "This place really is my second home," I whispered. I had no idea it would be the last morning I would ever say those words. As usual, I began my routine. I emptied trash cans, checked the heating system, replaced 2 broken light bulbs, fixed a loose classroom door. Around 8 o'clock, students started arriving. Several of them waved. "Morning, Mr. Carter." "Good morning." One little boy stopped beside me. "My mom made cookies." He held out a small paper bag. "She said to give these to you." I laughed. "Tell your mom I said thank you." Moments like that reminded me why I loved my job. It wasn't just cleaning. It was being part of people's lives. Around 10 that morning, my phone vibrated. It was Sarah. She never called during work unless something was important. I answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart." Her voice sounded weak. "I'm sorry to bother you. I just came back from the hospital." My heart skipped a beat. "What happened?" "The doctor wants more tests. He found something." Silence filled the phone. "What did he find?" "I don't know yet, but he looked worried." I leaned against the wall. Everything around me suddenly felt quiet. Even though hundreds of students were walking through the hallway, I couldn't hear them anymore. "I'll come home early." "No," Sarah said softly. "Finish your work. We'll talk tonight." Before I could answer, she hung up. The rest of the day felt different. I tried to focus, but my hand shook while I worked. Every few minutes, I looked at my phone, waiting, hoping, praying. That evening, we sat together in the doctor's office. Neither of us spoke. The doctor entered carrying several papers. His face told us everything before he even opened his mouth. "I'm afraid the results aren't good." Sarah reached for my hand. I held it tightly. "You have stage 2 breast cancer." The room disappeared. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I stared at the doctor's lips, but I barely heard the next few sentences. "Chemotherapy, surgery, treatment, recovery, months, maybe longer." The drive home was completely silent. Rain hit the windshield. The wipers moved back and forth. Neither of us said a word. When we finally parked in front of our little house, Sarah broke the silence. "I'm scared." It was the first time I had ever heard fear in her voice. I turned toward her. "So am I." Then I wrapped my arms around her. We sat inside that old truck for almost 20 minutes. Neither of us wanted to get out, because once we walked through our front door, Our lives would never be the same again. The following weeks became a blur. Hospital visits, medical bills, blood tests, medicine, waiting rooms, long nights. I started taking extra jobs after school, cleaning office buildings, washing restaurant kitchens, even mowing lawns on weekends. Some nights, I came home after midnight. My back hurt. My knees hurt. Sometimes my hands bled from working too much. But I kept going, because every extra dollar meant another chance to help Sarah. One evening, as I counted the money we had earned that week, Sarah looked at me. "You need to rest." I smiled. "I'll rest later." When you're healthy again." She lowered her eyes. "What if that day never comes?" I immediately shook my head. "Don't say that. We're going to beat this. I promise." I truly believed those words. I had to, because without hope, what did we have left? Then, 3 months later, another letter arrived. It was from the school district. At first, I thought it was just another staff newsletter. I couldn't have been more wrong. Inside that envelope was a decision that would destroy the only career I had ever known. Chapter 3, 18 years gone in 2 minutes. I didn't open the letter right away. I placed it on the kitchen table beside the unpaid bills. Sarah looked at the envelope. "The school district?" I nodded. "Probably another policy update." She smiled. "Open it before dinner." "I will." But something about that envelope made me nervous. Maybe it was the official stamp. Maybe it was the thick paper inside. Or maybe, deep down, I already knew. After dinner, I finally picked it up. I carefully opened it. The letter was short. Too short. "Mr. Daniel Carter, please report to the principal's office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. That was all. No explanation. No details. Just one sentence. I looked at Sarah. She noticed the worry on my face. "It's probably nothing." I hope so. That night, neither of us slept very well. The next morning, I arrived at school earlier than usual. The sky was gray. Cold wind blew across the empty parking lot. Even the birds seemed unusually quiet. I unlocked the front doors, started my normal routine, swept the entrance, checked the lights, emptied the trash bins. I tried to convince myself everything was normal, but every few minutes, I looked at the clock. 8:30, 8:45, 8:58. Finally, 9 o'clock. I walked toward the principal's office. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I knocked on the door, a quiet voice answered. "Come in." Principal Anderson was sitting behind his desk. Next to him sat a woman I had never seen before. She wore a dark business suit. Several folders were stacked neatly in front of her. Neither of them smiled. "Please have a seat, Daniel." I sat down. The room felt unusually cold. Principal Anderson folded his hands together. He took a deep breath. "I don't know how to say this." My heart started racing. "The school board has approved a new facilities contract." I frowned. "I don't understand." "The district has hired a private maintenance company." For a second, I simply stared at him. Then the woman spoke. "As part of the transition, your position has been eliminated." Eliminated. Such a simple word. Yet it felt like someone had punched me in the chest. "I've worked here for 18 years. "I know." Principal Anderson lowered his eyes. "This decision wasn't mine. I fought against it, but the board voted unanimously." I looked around the office. The walls, the family photos, the school awards. Everything suddenly looked different. "So, I asked quietly. Today is my last day? The woman nodded. We appreciate your years of service. Those words hurt more than anything. Years of service. As if 18 years could fit into one sentence. As if thousands of mornings, thousands of repaired desks, thousands of conversations could all be replaced with a piece of paper. Principal Anderson slid another envelope across the desk. This includes your final paycheck and a small severance package. I didn't even touch it. Instead, I asked only one question. What happens tomorrow morning? He looked confused. What do you mean? Who unlocks the school? Silence filled the room. For the first time, neither of them had an answer. I walked out carrying the envelope. The hallway looked exactly the same. Students laughed. Teachers hurried to class. Someone dropped a backpack. Someone argued about homework. Life continued, as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. Mrs. Wilson saw my face. Daniel? Are you all right? I tried to smile. I'm fine. She knew I was lying. Without saying a word, she hugged me. I am so sorry. Coach Harris walked over. What happened? When he heard the news, he shook his head. This place won't be the same without you. One by one, more teachers came. Some shook my hand. Some hugged me. Some had tears in their eyes. Then something unexpected happened. A group of students gathered in the hallway. One of them asked, Mr. Carter, are you leaving? I couldn't lie. Yes. The hallway became completely silent. A freshman stepped forward. You fixed my wheelchair last winter. Another student smiled sadly. You stayed after school to help me find my lost backpack. A girl from the music club whispered, You came to every concert. I hadn't realized they remembered. I thought I had spent 18 years unnoticed. Maybe I had been wrong. I returned to the maintenance room one final time. It wasn't much. Just a tiny room in the basement. A workbench. Old shelves. Paint cans. Cleaning supplies. A rusty radio that barely worked. But it had been my place. My second home. I opened my old locker. Inside were only a few things. A faded family photo. My favorite coffee mug. An old baseball cap. And a handwritten card from years ago. It simply said, Thank you for believing in me. There was no name. No signature. I smiled. Then I placed the card carefully into my pocket. I didn't know it yet, but that forgotten card was the first clue to the miracle that was about to enter my life. Chapter 4. When Hope Began to Fade. I carried the small cardboard box to my truck. It felt strangely light. 18 years of memories, packed into one box. I placed it on the passenger seat and looked back at the school. Students were laughing on the front steps. Teachers were walking between buildings. The American flag waved gently in the wind. Everything looked exactly the same, except I no longer belonged there. I started the engine. The old truck hesitated for a moment. Then it came to life with its familiar rumble. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The school grew smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared. I didn't know it then, but it would be many years before I saw those halls again. When I arrived home, Sarah was sitting on the front porch. She had wrapped herself in a thick blanket. Her chemotherapy had taken away much of her strength. Even smiling seemed difficult some days. The moment she saw the cardboard box, she understood. She slowly stood up. I didn't say a word. Neither did she. She simply walked toward me and wrapped her arms around me. I'm so sorry, she whispered. For a long moment, We stood there in silence. Sometimes, silence says more than words ever can. That evening, we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas dinners. Now it was covered with papers, medical bills, electric bills, mortgage payments, insurance notices. I took out a notebook. For the first time in years, I wrote down every dollar we had, our savings, my final paycheck, Sarah's disability benefits. Then I added our monthly expenses. When I finished, I stared at the numbers. We could survive. Maybe 2 months. 3, if we skipped some medications. Neither of us wanted to say it, but we were thinking the same thing. What happens after that? The next morning, I put on my cleanest shirt. I printed copies of my resume at the public library. Then I started looking for work. The first hardware store wasn't hiring. The second warehouse wanted someone 20 years younger. The third company offered only part-time hours. The pay wasn't even enough to cover our mortgage. Still, I thanked every manager. I shook every hand. I smiled every time, even when I knew the answer before they spoke. "We'll call you." Most never did. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became a month. My toolbox stayed in the truck. Unused. Every morning I left the house pretending to be hopeful. Every evening I returned carrying another disappointment. One afternoon, I visited a construction company. The owner looked at my resume. 18 years as a school janitor? Yes. He nodded politely. You seem like a hardworking man. For one brief second, my heart lifted. Then he continued, but we need someone with commercial construction experience. I'm sorry. I thanked him anyway. Outside. I sat inside my truck for nearly an hour. Not because I was tired. Because I didn't want Sarah to see another failed day in my eyes. Money disappeared faster than I had imagined. We stopped eating at restaurants. Not that we had gone often before. We canceled cable television. We sold Sarah's sewing machine. Then my fishing boat. The little boat had belonged to my father. He had taught me how to fish when I was 10 years old. Selling it felt like losing another piece of him. But medicine came first. Always. One rainy Friday evening, I opened the refrigerator. There wasn't much inside. A carton of milk, a few eggs, half a loaf of bread, some leftover soup. Sarah noticed me staring. She smiled. We've lived with less before. I forced a smile back. Yeah, but I promised you a better life. She reached across the table and held my hand. You already gave me one. No. I gave you struggles. You gave me love. I looked away because I didn't want her to see the tears filling my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked into the garage. My old toolbox sat on the shelf. I opened it. Inside were 18 years of memories. A worn hammer, a tape measure, several screwdrivers, an old flashlight held together with tape. I picked up the flashlight. I remembered using it during power outages at the school. Students had clapped when the lights came back on. It seemed like another lifetime. As I closed the toolbox, something slipped out. A folded piece of paper landed on the floor. I unfolded it carefully. It was another handwritten note. The ink had faded with time. It read, "Thank you for helping me when everyone else walked away. One day I'll repay your kindness. I promise." Again, there was no name, no date, just those words. I smiled sadly. Whoever you are, I hope life has been kind to you. I folded the note and placed it in my wallet. I had no idea that somewhere, not far away, the person who wrote those words was searching for me, and in less than 24 hours, our paths would cross again. Chapter 5. The Boy I Couldn't Remember. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. Then I remembered. I no longer had a job. There was nowhere I needed to be. No classrooms waiting to be unlocked. No students rushing through the hallways. The silence inside the house felt heavier than ever. Sarah was still asleep. The chemotherapy had exhausted her. I quietly made coffee. Only one cup this time. As I stood by the kitchen window, I watched the rain fall. My phone hadn't rung in weeks. No interviews. No job offers. Nothing. I sighed and looked at the clock. 8:30. What now? I whispered. Just then, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a young woman stood outside. She wore a navy blue jacket with the logo of a courier company. Mr. Daniel Carter? Yes. I have a certified envelope for you. My heart sank. Another bill? Another notice? I signed the paper and closed the door. The envelope had no return address. Only my name. I carefully opened it. Inside was a single white card. It read, "Please come to Maplewood Community Hall today at 2 p.m. Someone has been waiting many years to thank you." There was no signature. No explanation. Nothing else. I read it 3 times. Sarah walked into the kitchen. "What is it?" I handed her the card. She looked at me. "Do you know who sent it?" I shook my head. Could it be a scam? Maybe. She smiled softly. Or maybe it's something good. I laughed quietly. I don't remember the last time something good happened. She squeezed my hand. Then maybe it's time. At 1:45, I parked outside the community hall. The building looked old but well cared for. There were several expensive cars in the parking lot. A black SUV, a luxury sedan, a silver sports car. I frowned. This can't be for me. For a moment, I considered driving away, but curiosity won. I walked inside. The lobby was almost empty. Only a young receptionist smiled at me. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes." "They're expecting you." She pointed toward a large wooden door. My heart began beating faster. I slowly opened it. The room was filled with people, nearly 50 of them. Men, women, camera operators, photographers, several reporters. I froze. The conversation stopped. Every face turned toward me. I looked behind me. Maybe they were waiting for someone else. But there was no one. Then, a tall man wearing an elegant gray suit stepped forward. He looked to be in his mid-30s. Confident, successful, yet strangely, his eyes looked familiar. He smiled. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he asked a simple question. "Do you still carry peanut butter sandwiches?" I blinked. "What?" He laughed. The cafeteria was closed that day. My backpack was soaked. My father had just lost his job. You sat beside me near the gym. Suddenly, a forgotten memory returned. The rainy afternoon. The frightened little boy. The sandwich. I stared at him in disbelief. "You." He nodded. "My name is Ethan. You probably don't remember me, but I have remembered you. Every single day." My throat tightened. "You were just a child, and you treated me like I mattered. I've never forgotten that." I shook my head. "It was only a sandwich." Ethan smiled. "No, Mr. Carter. It wasn't. It was hope." The room became completely silent. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket. He carefully unfolded an old piece of paper. The edges were worn. The ink had faded. "I think this belongs to you." He handed it to me. I looked down. It was the other half of the handwritten note I had found in my toolbox. In a child's handwriting, it read, "One day I'll repay your kindness." I couldn't speak. My hands began to tremble. "You wrote this?" "Yes." "I was 12 years old. I was too embarrassed to give it to you. So, I left it inside your locker." I looked at him, then back at the note, then at the room full of strangers. I felt tears forming in my eyes. "Ethan, you became a good man." He smiled. "I learned from one." He took a deep breath. Then he looked at everyone in the room. "It's time for them to know who you really are." At that moment, I still believed this meeting was only about saying thank you. I had absolutely no idea that Ethan had spent the last 6 months planning something that would completely change my life forever. Chapter 6. Kindness always finds its way home. I stood there in complete silence. The room around me disappeared. All I could see was Ethan, the frightened 12-year-old boy I had once met near the school gym, was now standing in front of me as a confident businessman. He smiled. "I've wanted to meet you again for a very long time." I finally found my voice. "I never expected this. I only shared a sandwich." Ethan gently shook his head. "No, you shared dignity. When everyone else walked past me, you stopped. You listened. You made me believe that I still mattered." He turned toward the audience. "You all know me as the founder of Carter Technologies." A large screen behind him lit up. Photos from his childhood appeared. A small apartment, his parents, old school pictures. Then one photograph filled the screen. A young janitor, standing beside a smiling boy. Someone had secretly taken the picture years ago. The room became quiet again. "Most people think success comes from money," Ethan continued. "It doesn't. It begins with one person who chooses kindness. And for me, that person was Daniel Carter." People began applauding. I didn't know where to look. I had spent my entire life trying not to attract attention. Now, everyone in the room was standing, applauding me. It felt unreal. When the applause finally stopped, Ethan walked toward me. "I've been looking for you for almost a year." I looked surprised. "For me?" "Yes." "When I heard the school had replaced its janitors, I went looking, but you had already left." I asked teachers. I asked former students. It took months before I found your address. I smiled. "You worked harder to find me than anyone has ever worked to hire me." The room laughed softly. Then Ethan's expression became serious. "I also learned about Sarah." I lowered my head. "She's fighting cancer." "I know. And I know how expensive that fight can be." He reached into his pocket and handed me a small envelope. "I'd like you to open this." Inside was a single document. At first, I couldn't understand what I was reading. Then my eyes stopped on one sentence. "All outstanding medical expenses. Paid in full." I looked at Ethan. This can't be real." "It is. You and Sarah will never receive another hospital bill." My hands began shaking. I tried to speak. No words came out. Before I could recover, Ethan smiled again. "I'm not finished." Everyone in the room laughed. He pointed toward the large windows. Outside, a brand new blue pickup truck slowly drove into the parking lot. It looked almost exactly like my old truck, only newer, safer, stronger. You once drove me home in your old pickup during a storm. You said, "A reliable truck helps a man take care of the people he loves." I've never forgotten those words. The audience applauded again. I covered my face. For the first time since I was a child, I cried without trying to hide it. Then Ethan said something I never expected. "I don't want to give you charity. I want to give you purpose." He handed me another folder. Inside was a business proposal. I recently opened a scholarship foundation. We renovate schools. We provide supplies. We help children from struggling families. I need someone I can trust. Someone who understands schools. Someone who understands people. He looked directly into my eyes. "Daniel, would you work with me?" I stared at him. "You want to hire me?" He smiled. "No. I want you to lead the program." I couldn't believe it. Me? Yes. I've met many successful people, but very few truly good people. I'd rather build my future with a good man. The room erupted into applause once more. That evening, I drove home in the new truck. But the greatest gift wasn't sitting in the driveway. It was waiting inside the house. Sarah. She was sitting in her favorite chair. When she saw me smiling, she smiled too. Something happened. I nodded. Something unbelievable. I told her everything, from the mysterious invitation, to meeting Ethan, to the hospital bills, to the new job. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she simply cried. Not tears of fear, not tears of pain, tears of relief. For the first time in many months, we slept peacefully. 6 months later, life looked very different. Sarah's treatment was going well. Her doctors were optimistic. Every week, we visited schools together. We delivered books, backpacks, computers, winter coats. Sometimes, I met children who reminded me of Ethan. Quiet, scared, carrying worries no child should carry. Whenever I saw one sitting alone, I sat beside them, just like I had done years ago, because now I understood something. You never know which small act of kindness will change someone's entire life, or when that kindness will find its way back to you. One sunny afternoon, Ethan and I visited Maplewood High School, the same school where I had worked for 18 years. The hallways looked exactly the same. The smell of fresh floor wax was still there. The lockers still slammed shut between classes. Students still laughed as they hurried to lessons. For a moment, it felt as if no time had passed. The new principal welcomed us warmly. Before leaving, I walked alone down the old hallway. I stopped outside the maintenance room. The door was open. Inside, a young janitor was organizing his tools. He looked up and smiled. "Can I help you, sir?" I smiled back. "No. I just wanted to say, take care of this place." He nodded proudly. "I will." As I turned to leave, a little boy accidentally dropped all of his books across the hallway. The young janitor immediately put down his broom. He knelt beside the boy. "It's okay," he said. "I've got you." I smiled. Some things never change. If my story teaches anything, it is this. People may forget your job. They may forget your title. They may even forget your name. But they will never forget how you made them feel. A kind word, a helping hand, a simple sandwich. Sometimes, the smallest act creates the greatest miracle. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, remember to be kind to someone today, because you never know whose life you might change, or whose kindness may one day change yours.